After making fun of Black Boy for claiming that his father was a SEAL, the judge froze when he entered the room carrying the unit. Like a wave of disdain, the laughter reverberated around the courtroom. The 15-year-old kid sat on the witness stand, her hands shaking slightly as she grasped a crumpled piece of paper. Said, and Judge Harrison Mitchell couldn't stop himself. "Let me get this straight, young man," the judge began, theatrically taking off his spectacles and grinning patronizingly as he wiped the lenses. "Are you implying that his father is a Navy SEAL and that he is a black man from the Detroit suburbs, one of the world's best-trained elite combatants?" Tears threatened to fall, but Tyler Washington held his chin up. "Indeed, sir, my dad has 12 years of service. I know he is a hero, yet he is unable to discuss his missions." Sandrican, the social services lawyer, let out a long sigh. The minor has obviously been told to make up this tale in order to avoid being put with a foster family, Your Honor. 3 years ago, the biological father left the family and hasn't been heard from since. "That's a lie," exclaimed Tyler, leaping from his seat. "My dad didn't leave me. He has a covert mission. He used a secure phone to call me last week." The judge used too much power when he slammed his gavel. "Now, young sir, have a seat. This is not a place for her juvenile fantasies. This is a serious courtroom." 6 months prior, the kid had lost his mother in a vehicle accident. He had since moved in with his aging grandma, who was suffering from aggressive cancer. Tyler understood the reality that no one wanted to hear, but the system wanted to put him in foster care on the basis of parental abandonment. The judge went on, "Boy," in a sarcastic tone. The judge laughed again. Then, a few court officials. "What kind of action movie have you been watching, kid? Save those stories for his schoolmates." Tyler had come to court that day with a briefcase filled with letters, old photos, and a special cell phone that only took calls from encrypted numbers. "I served 25 years in the Navy. I personally know commanders of SEAL units, and even if there were, do you really think a man with that level of responsibility would abandon his son for 3 years?" "He didn't abandon me," Tyler repeated, her voice firmer in her voice. For years, he had kept these items like treasures, knowing instinctively that one day he would need them to prove that his father was not the abandoner everyone believed him to be. The state-appointed lawyer, a man wary from decades of similar cases, didn't even look up from his documents. "Your Honor, I suggest we proceed with foster care placement." The minor is clearly in denial about his father's abandonment, but there was something in Tyler's eyes that didn't match the usual despair. A strange serenity, as if he were keeping a secret too powerful to be revealed before the right time. While everyone mocked his words, he nervously touched a small military brooch pinned to his shirt lapel, a symbol that very few people in the world would recognize. If this story of courage and truth has touched you, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of humiliation would turn into the most shocking revelation that court had ever witnessed. Tyler's public humiliation was far from over. Judge Mitchell leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the spectacle he had created, while other court officials exchanged amused glances. "You know what, young Washington," said the judge, removing his glasses and cleaning the lenses with a theatrical gesture. "My military experience has taught me to recognize liars, and you, my boy, are blatantly lying to this court." Tyler felt the heat rise to his neck, but he kept his posture straight. Within the bag he gripped tightly was a letter written by the Naval Special Warfare Command Commander, and dated 2 years prior. He felt it was not yet time to make the revelation, though. Mitchell went on, now in a patronizing professorial tone. "Let me tell you something about the Navy SEALs. Globally, there are 350 guys. 350 of the best troops this nation has ever produced. Admiral Thompson has been in charge of these activities for 20 years, and I have met him in person. It is obvious that someone told the youngster to make up this imaginary tale in order to get out of the adoption procedure. My father didn't give me any instructions," Tyler said. Everyone in the room was taken aback by the firmness with which she spoke. She learnt from him to always speak the truth, even if others don't believe her. The judge let out a loud laugh. Tyler briefly closed his eyes as he recalled the last call he had received from his father. Oh, how touching. And where exactly is this heroic father? Why does he never show up when you need him? Why does he abandon his son for 3 years without giving the school, the doctors, or social services a single explanation? The faraway voice over satellite interference said that he loved him more than everything in the world, that he couldn't give specifics, but that he would return as soon as possible, and that the mission had been extended indefinitely. My father didn't abandon me, Tyler explained once again. This time, looking directly into the judge's eyes. You don't understand what it means to serve your country in operations you don't even know exist. Operations I don't even know exist, Mitchell hit the table with his fist. I was a destroyer, commander, in the Persian Gulf, kid. There isn't a Derek Washington in the US Special Forces. I can assure you, and I've been on classified operations you can't even imagine. The judge was unaware that Tyler had grown up hearing military-coded phone talks. During brief phone conversations, his father would occasionally mention communication frequencies, Navy base names, and identification numbers, all of which he had committed to memory. Unaware of the significance of this information, he had held it as a secret treasure for years. Tyler paused, and Sandrican capitalized on it. Your Honor, it is obvious that someone in the community indoctrinated the kid to fabricate this story. Maybe his own grandma, who is obviously incapable of caring for a child due to her physical and mental limitations. Tyler said, "Leave my grandmother out of this," with a tone of authority that was out of character for a 50. She showed me that true men will sacrifice everything for the people they love, and she is the strongest woman I know. The judge's eyebrows went up. How melodramatic. I guess she also informed you that his father is on covert missions to save the planet. In fact, Tyler calmly retorted, my grandmother taught me how to spot liars, and that sometimes the truth has to wait for the right time to come out. There was something about Tyler's delivery of these remarks that gradually altered the mood of the room. The courtroom plunged into an uneasy quiet, as though everyone had suddenly realized they were missing something crucial. But for Mitchell, the silence meant success. Excellent, young man. I'll give it a shot if you persist on this illusion. He must have some documentation, some military identification, or some other proof that supports this ludicrous claim if his father is indeed a Navy SEAL on a covert operation. The military button on her lapel, a tiny emblem his father had given her years before, was touched hesitantly by Tyler, who explained that it was meant to keep her safe until she could go back home. Although the girl had never looked into its meaning, she had a gut feeling that it was significant. Tyler stated, I have proof, in a stern yet quiet manner. More evidence than you might think. Then Mitchell yelled, pounding his gavel. This act is getting old to me. Show us this fictitious evidence, or confess to this court that you are lying. A few neatly arranged documents were taken out of the folder as Tyler carefully opened it. But before he could say anything, he raised his head to face the judge with a gaze that was a combination of resolve and something more. Mitchell shifted uneasily in his chair because of something. Do you really want to see this proof in front of everyone here? Tyler inquired. Because there won't be any turning back after I show you what I have here. Each humiliation just makes Tyler stronger in ways his captors were blind to. A quiet power fed by the very wrong he attempted to enforce. The youngster in front of him had secrets too strong to be disregarded for much longer. And those wealthy individuals were unaware that every act of disdain was writing his own sentence of defeat. After inhaling deeply, Tyler opened the folder all the way and took out the first document. The faded photograph showed 15 uniformed men standing in excellent formation at a naval installation that was obviously not American, and virtually unidentifiable signature of the Derek Washington. Bravo Team's covert operation can be found in the lower right corner. Sandrican replied, an old photo proves nothing, as she leaned in to look at the picture. However, there was something about the picture that caused Judge Mitchell to slant forward a little. Anyone can get military photos on the internet. The partially visible insignia suggested a specialized unit he had never seen in his 25 years of duty. And the outfits were not typical American. The second thing Tyler put on the table was a customized satellite phone that displayed active military frequencies on its digital display and had a retractable antenna. This phone was used by my father to call me last week. At 11:42 p.m. the duration of the call was precisely 3 minutes and 17 seconds. The operational zones, standard time for security communications. Zone of operations. The judge chuckled, but it sounded artificial. You don't know what you're talking about, kid. Ignoring the interruption, Tyler went on. Frequency Delta 77 Alpha. Direct connection, using NSA Level 5 encryption on military satellites. At the conclusion of his calls, he consistently utilizes the identical security codes. It was a different hush than the others that followed. Mitchell's gaze remained focused on the phone, which was obviously not standard civilian equipment, and he stopped laughing altogether. Sandrican scowled as he realized that these particular technological aspects did not appear to have been created by a teenager. Tyler capitalized on the hesitancy and went on. In 2019, Operation Trident Neptune was concluded. 2020's Operation Silent Anchor. Since 2021, Operation Deep Current has continued. She uttered each name with military accuracy, as though she had been taught to commit them to memory. Enough. Mitchell pounded his hand too hard against the table. I'm not sure where you learnt that this is a theater. Your intricate delusions are an attempt to deceive this court. The judge was unaware that Tyler had listened to his father's phone calls for years. At first, without realizing how important they were. But over time, he had started looking up military jargon, communication frequencies, and even operation titles that occasionally made their way onto niche websites. He had inadvertently become an authority on military communications that were classified. Sandrican, His Honor, interrupted. Let's stop this charade, I say. It is obvious that someone has coached the youngster to repeat these technical terminology. The fact that his father has been missing for 3 years remains unchanged. The judge's voice took on an authority that caused everyone in the room to fidget uneasily as Tyler turned to face her. Respectfully, sir. You served in the Persian Gulf aboard destroyers. You've never dealt with integrated special operations units, which function outside of established military channels. Despite being familiar with basic naval communications and conventional security procedures, Mitchell gulped when he realized how accurate the information was. How in the world was a 15-year-old Detroit suburbia child aware of such particular military communication protocols? People like me, even with respectable military experience, don't have access to information about experimental units, Tyler added, referring to his father's explanation to him. For this reason, the name Derek Washington is not listed in traditional Navy records. The third item Tyler took out of the folder was a formal letter on letterhead that was too professional to be fake, complete with stamps and signatures. The title read, Navy Special Warfare Command Classified Operations, and the date was 2 years ago. This letter confirms the indefinite extension of my father's mission due to unforeseen operational circumstances, Tyler said. Sandra Chen hurried over and said, signed by Commander Richardson. Naval Special Warfare Group 2, let me see that. She carefully read the letter, searching for indications of fraud, but the seals and watermarks on the paper seemed authentic. Tyler became aware that he had achieved his first minor triumph at that moment. Uncertainty had replaced utter skepticism. There was no longer any laughter in the room. They were perplexed as they attempted to comprehend information that did not align with his prior notions. Judge Mitchell looked over the letter multiple times, obviously upset. As a veteran Navy officer, he understood the formal aspects of the paper to be authentic. However, the consequences were not accepted by his intellect. With slightly shaking hands, Mitchell returned the letter and stated, even if this is true, it still doesn't explain 3 years of total absence. Where are the frequent phone conversations, in-person meetings, and steady communication that any responsible parent would have? Tyler made another, nearly unconscious, touch to the tiny military insignia on her lapel. Could I ask you a question, sir? You may, Mitchell said, while her tone showed signs of increasing annoyance. Did you stay in touch with your family on a daily basis while you were conducting operations in the Persian Gulf? Did you make a weekly phone call home? Did you inform civilians about the specifics of your missions? Mitchell felt the question as if it were a physical blow. He had gone months without speaking to anyone outside during his own active service stints, particularly during delicate operations. These extended absences had harmed his own family. He said, "That's different," but her conviction was obviously shattered. Tyler chose to use greater psychological pressure after noticing the hesitancy. "My father taught me that military sacrifice is not just for the soldier, but for the whole family. That sometimes loving someone means being willing to be misunderstood in order to protect something greater." The courtroom was silent for a moment. The story had been rewritten by Tyler. He was now a young man standing up for a father who served his nation under unusual circumstances, not a youngster making up lies about an absent father. Sandra Chen chose to step up her attack after seeing that she was losing control of the situation. "Your Honor, accepting this fanciful tale for a short while does not absolve us of our duty to ensure the child's welfare. Emotional and financial security cannot be provided by a parent on an unending secret mission." With a barely noticeable smirk on his lips, Tyler reiterated, "Can I also demonstrate financial stability to you?" Everyone in the room froze when he pulled one final document from his briefcase. A bank statement in Derek Washington's name that showed consistent monthly contributions into a joint account with Tyler. The amounts were substantial, much more than an ordinary soldier could receive, he said. "These deposits have been coming in on the 15th of every month for 3 years in a row," Tyler remarked, his voice now bearing a wounded dignity. "My father never abandoned me financially. They were utilized to cover our essential living expenses, his school fees, and his grandmother's medical bills." Mitchell's hands were shaking a little as she studied the bank statement. The figures were honest. This boy's life was continuously being funded by someone, and the sum indicated a specialized military source of income. And Tyler went on, taking out his own mobile phone. "I have his call recordings. 17 calls throughout the previous 6 months. I'm able to play all of them." Tyler played an audio file before anyone objected. The speaker had a clear, mature voice that was full of military authority. "I apologize for being unable to attend your birthday, Tyler, son. An additional 6 weeks have been added to the assignment. Look after her. Continue your studies. And don't forget what we spoke about preserving our secret. Kid, you have my undying affection." There was no denying the recording's emotional genuineness. That tone of military discipline, coupled with paternal warmth, was unfake. Tyler shut down the sound and gave the judge his full attention. "Sir, my father did not desert me. You may not entirely comprehend the manner he serves his country, but it doesn't mean he isn't carrying out his paternal duties." There was no doubt that the mood of the room had altered. No longer was Tyler viewed as a desperate young man inventing tales. His information and data challenged all the preconceived notions, and he had grown into a formidable force. Evidently upset, Judge Mitchell reclined in his chair. He had practiced law for 30 years, but he had never encountered a case this complicated. The evidence was very convincing, but his professional impulse was to write the account off as youthful fiction. There was utter silence for a minute. Tyler kept an erect stance that appeared to have been honed by years of familial military discipline. Even as he continued to touch the military brooch without realizing it, his eyes had an unwavering assurance of someone who understood exactly where he stood, which contrasted with the typical sensitivity of kids in court. Those in positions of luxury were unaware that every effort at humiliation merely served to expose more nuanced aspects of a reality that would soon become unavoidable. To last, secrets that Tyler still had would change that courtroom beyond anyone's wildest expectations. She was about to receive a prize for her smart patience that would leave everyone stunned. Tyler traced the outline of the emblem he had carried for years without completely comprehending its actual power with his fingers as he touched the small military pin one more time. "Before I present my last piece of evidence to you, sir, may I ask you one more question?" "Which query?" Mitchell answered, her voice revealing her weariness and mounting annoyance. "Are you aware of this symbol's meaning?" After taking the pin off his lapel, Tyler set it down on the judge's desk. Despite its modest size, Mitchell leaned in to take a closer look at his work, because of something about it. Insignia, not seen in traditional military manuals, were blended with traditional nautical features to create the symbol. Mitchell scowled, her nautical background allowing her to recognize the pieces in part but not the precise combination. "I've never seen this specific symbol," Mitchell said, grudgingly giving the pin back. For the first time during the hearing, Tyler grinned. "The reason for this is because families of operators of top-secret experimental units are identified by this sign. When he was 10 years old, his father gave it to him, claiming it would keep him safe until he could return home." Sandrikan gave a tense laugh. "Now, we're going to pretend military pins are proof of something that could have been bought at any military surplus store." "It could," Tyler replied quietly. He pulled out his phone and entered a series of numbers. "But this particular pin has a special feature. This particular combination. On the rear triggers a military emergency signal that only the relevant unit may respond to." Tyler hit a nearly imperceptible series of dots on the pin's reverse side. For an instant, a low-frequency, high-pitched sound that was nearly undetectable reverberated around the space. Mitchell responded, "That doesn't prove anything," but his tone was less determined than it had been. Tyler looked at his watch and said, "It will prove something in about 5 minutes. The relevant unit has an urgent response protocol that must be followed when the emergency signal is activated. I learnt from my father to use it only when there was a genuine danger to my safety." There was a thick quiet in the room. Calmly, Tyler returned all the papers to the folder, arranging them with military accuracy that was a clear reflection of her well-known training. Her attitude had altered entirely. She was carrying out a well-thought-out plan, rather than a desperate adolescent defending an improbable tale. Everybody in the room shifted uneasily as Tyler said, "You've spent this entire morning trying to convince me that my father abandoned me. You tried to make me believe that I was making this up. That I was just a confused kid from the suburbs, with fantasies about military heroes. Your Honor, I propose that we put an end to this charade," Sandrikan said, anxiously checking her watch. A distant but distinct sound cut off the minor's speech, indicating that she is obviously upset. The sound of large military vehicles speeding towards the courthouse. Instinctively, Mitchell got to her feet, her military background identifying the sound of an ongoing operation. "What on earth?" Mitchell walked to the window and murmured. Tyler was still sitting very still. "That translates to 4 tactical vehicles and most likely 16 operators. CONVENTIONAL. Procedure for a well-known emergency reaction." Outside the building, the sound of the cars ceased suddenly. As they quickly approached the courtroom, heavy, synchronized footsteps reverberated through the court hallways. With a pallor Tyler had never seen in an adult, Mitchell went back to his chair. Sandrikan said, "That's impossible," yet her hands were shaking as she arranged papers needlessly. With complete military authority, the door of the courthouse opened. Derek Washington was the first to enter, and even before anyone saw her clothing, her presence demanded attention. Even though he wasn't very tall, her movements and posture gave the impression that the room was smaller. Her outfits were flawless, her faces were expressionless, and her movements were timed like a well-oiled military machine, as 15 Navy SEALs entered behind her in perfect formation. Absolute quiet descended upon the room. Mitchell automatically stood, his military experience superseding her legal authority. Sandra Chen, unable to comprehend what she was seeing, stayed motionless in her chair with her mouth agape. Derek Washington gave a beautiful salute while stopping at a polite distance from the judge's bench. United States Navy SEALs Commander Derek Washington responded to the family emergency signal by reporting. Calmly, Sir Tyler got up and approached his father. "Dad," she said simply, her voice carrying 3 years of pent-up longing. Derek looked at his son, and for a brief moment, his military discipline faltered, replaced by pure paternal love. He placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder, a small gesture that communicated volumes about the bond between them. "Stat report, son," Derek said, her voice maintaining its military tone. But with evident affection, Tyler pointed to the judge and the lawyer. "They tried to convince me that you abandoned me. Dad, there are no Navy SEALs like you," they remarked. That I was deceiving the judge. The judge visibly retreated beneath the weight of Derek Washington's stare as she turned to face Mitchell. "Is that accurate, sir? My son was lying about my service." "Did you tell him?" Mitchell gulped hard. All of her prior cockiness vanished. "I didn't know anything about classified operations." "Had no knowledge," Derek reiterated, her tone piercingly icy. "Therefore, instead of acknowledging the limitations of his own military expertise, you concluded my 15-year-old son was lying." One of the SEALs came forward with information. 20 minutes ago, Commander Authorization Documentation for Confidential Dissemination arrived. For the duration of this hearing, Operation Green Trident has been formally declassified. Derek took a sealed packet out of her military jacket and nodded. "Judge Mitchell, these records attest to my involvement in 3 years of classified Special Navy operations. Because of the circumstances of this hearing, they include congressional authorization for limited disclosure." Mitchell's hands were clearly shaking when he took the folder. His expression slowly shifted from skepticism to surprise as he read, finally, to something like terror as he came to terms with the seriousness of his error. Derek went on to say that for national security concerns, the operations detailed in these documents necessitated my family's extended absence and restricted communication. I never left my son behind. On the contrary, my desire to create a safer world for him drove me to accept every task. Commander Washington, there are still concerns regarding family stability, even if you believe these materials to be accurate. Derek Washington then turned to face her, his expression causing her to choke on the words. "Ma'am, compared to many of the men who have been under his command, my son has demonstrated greater bravery, honesty, and loyalty today. With unwavering dignity, he has confronted systematic disbelief, maintained faith with her family, and safeguarded confidential information. He is not the only person in this room whose character needs to be questioned." Tyler watched the complete transformation of the dynamics in the room. The judge who had mocked him now couldn't maintain eye contact. The lawyer who had suggested that he was being indoctrinated now nervously organized, papers avoiding any direct confrontation. "Dad," Tyler said quietly, "can I go home now?" Derek smiled, and this time there was nothing military about the expression. It was pure paternal joy. "Yes, son. You are free to return home." Tyler stopped at the door and took one last look back as the father and son left, followed by the SEAL unit in perfect formation. Mitchell was still standing behind her desk, the military documents still in her shaking hands, her judicial authority completely shattered by the reality she had refused to accept. Those privileged people realized too late that they had spent hours trying to break the spirit of a young man whose strength came from a source she could never understand. The unwavering love of a hero who served his country in the most dangerous places in the world, but who never, even for a second, forgot that her most important mission was to be a father. 2 months later, Tyler walked through the halls of her new military prep school, one of the most prestigious in the country. His acceptance had not only been accepted, but accompanied by a full scholarship offered by the Naval Special Warfare Command itself. "Congratulations on your entrance exam," said the principal, shaking his hand firmly. "We've never seen such impressive results in military strategy from a 15-year-old. Derek Washington watched proudly from the sidelines. Now permanently based in Norfolk as chief instructor of the new integrated training program, her experimental unit had become the model for all future special operations. And he himself had been promoted to senior commander. Meanwhile, Judge Harrison Mitchell faced a full federal investigation. The video of that hearing, officially recorded for the court archives, had been leaked and gone viral nationwide. Her forced retirement was accompanied by an investigation into systematic bias in her previous judicial decisions. Sandra Chen had lost his license to practice family law after a devastating review of his past cases. The recording revealed a consistent pattern of discrimination against minority military families. "Dad," Tyler said, adjusting the military uniform he now wore with pride, "do you think they learned anything?" Derek smiled, watching the son who had transformed from a victim of prejudice into a national symbol of youthful courage. "Son, sometimes people need to be confronted with her own ignorance in order to grow." The important thing is that you never doubted the truth. Tyler touched the military pin, now permanently sewn onto his school uniform. Thank you for teaching me that honor is not something others can take away from you. No, Derek replied. Honor is something you carry, regardless of who believes in it or doesn't. Tyler learned that when you know your truth and defend it with dignity, even the most powerful are forced to recognize her greatness. Have you ever faced moments when no one believed in him? Sometimes the greatest victory is simply to continue being who he is, even when the entire world says he's wrong. That afternoon, Tyler received an early admission letter to West Point, along with a personal note to the young man who proved that courage has no age and that truth needs no permission to exist. The best revenge against prejudice was not to destroy those who humiliated him, but to build a life so extraordinary that it was impossible to ignore his worth. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that demonstrate that truth always finds its way to the people.